So welcome everyone. I'm here today with Alex Gramatzki, and I'm excited to have Alex today because he represents an interesting intersection of an entrepreneur that could provide us a unique perspective. He got involved with more than a dozen companies, both as an angel investor and as a entrepreneur. So I thought he could be interesting in our conversation about where digital adds value and where it does not. So Alex, welcome to Digital Value Creation.
Thank you. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks for having me on the show.
So we're going to get going with just tell us a couple of things about your background.
I started in real estate, actually, and after that moved into the oil and gas sector. Did a lot of mergers, acquisitions over there, about 40 of them, and then went into doing some stuff in the Maldives, some luxury hotel developments. I got involved in cryptocurrencies and blockchain, as you mentioned, early on, and I really felt that was overhyped, which is why I left that. I had some pretty big ambitions initially with cryptocurrencies and the use cases for them, but I didn't want to, ride a wave that I thought was going to crash and then fight the currents. I already fought the currents once in the oil and gas sector. Didn't want to do that again, and then I got involved with corporate wellness and health and technology and wellness technologies over there because there was a lot of things going on. And now I'm involved in music royalties and applying machine learning to analyze music royalties that come from tons of different revenue sources and all around the world, and trying to make some good predictions to forecast that.
This is what's fascinating to me. I think most people I know, whether it's on the investment side or entrepreneur side, they get stuck in one industry or maybe one sub-industry, and that's where they spend most of their life, and they keep investing in it or they keep starting companies in it. And you sort of straddle from one area to another. So how does somebody go from oil and gas to all these other areas?
Yeah, great question. And oil and gas for me was, a lot of it was commodity prices when they really came crashing down. And it was a very archaic industry where I felt it was going to be a lot of resistance. And I didn't want to be the next biggest CEO of the next future generation coal companies. So I thought, 50 years from now, where do I want to be? And if someone said, hey, you can be the CEO of the largest coal company, I'd say, I'd rather not. I'd rather, jump ship into a different industry. And that's where health and wellness technologies came in for me, because health is always going to be important. And technology is always going to be improving. And that's where I think digital value creation comes in, is because you really have to have someone and a team of expertise that are going to stay on top of technology, because every year it's changing, every year it's getting better, right? And that's where wellness technologies come in for me on that side of things. And that's how I was able to decide to really jump ship into new areas wherever I thought there's going to be consistent growth, because I like learning and I'm going to consistently be learning new things, and therefore there's no real experts until they're an expert, and then they have to stay on top of it though. So you really need a team though too to help you.
It's interesting because we didn't mention that you're from Calgary, and so in a way you were sort of born into oil and gas by default. It's surrounded by you, but then you got into the tech scene, the blockchains, and wellness. How do those transitions? Are you actively looking for new areas of where there's a displacement made its way to create value, or you sort of stumbled upon entrepreneurs or some ideas?
I'm always actively looking, and including angel investments, and I've done over a dozen angel investments just in 2019. And some of them are doing great despite COVID. And for example, one of them is a company called Athenian, and they were automating minute books. And I am involved in so many companies, so I was like, oh my God, I get my lawyers to send me this every year. I'm like, yeah, well, at the end of every year, you know what date you have to file the annual returns. Like, why can't it just send you an e-signature, you send it off and it gets filed? And I'm like, this is brilliant, right? So take my money, right? And so I'm always looking for opportunities where it makes sense. And I'm like, there's a ton of industries where automation can be super useful, especially when there's a high cost associated to what seems to be an expertise, but really it's an expertise that's been trapped in a certain area. And I think when you can unlock that, that's where I want to be spending my time.
So when you hear about like say an entrepreneur saying, "Oh, I have this digital widget and that's going to transform an industry," do you get excited? You get skeptical? What really happens then?
I a lot of times get skeptical, and within usually 2-3 minutes, I think you can tell right away, is there a use case for it or is there not a use case for it? And if you really have to like navigate and weasel your way into it, I think you're trying too hard to, put a square peg into a round hole. And that's what I want to stay away from. I want to go into areas where it's really obvious that this needs to be changed. And, a lot of doctors have a lot of friends that are doctors, but a lot of the information is trapped in their head. A lot of the charts, the common person can't read. And here we are with so much technology, so much focus on user experience, where I feel like people can start doing their own tests, like with these finger pricks, or taking blood samples on their own. Like, how hard can it be to take blood? And I know some people that's all they do, and depending on how much you take, it gets more complex. But those are the types of areas that we want to make a dent. And there's a lot of companies focusing on specific niches from your feet to your teeth, really. And I've seen companies focus on both. There's smart toothbrushes, and then there's companies that focus on your insoles and how you should be having that, and how it's just wild how diverse the world's becoming, but how smart and sophisticated people are coming in certain spaces. And the next question is, can they change that space, and why does somebody care about that product?
What kind of technology do you get excited about? Like I said, you may get excited about a piece of real estate as much as a piece of technology, but when you look out there, are you seeking one of my interviewees was Stephen Messer, and he says, "I'm just focusing on quantum computing." Is there something out there that's saying, "I'm really excited about that, I'm going to be watching where that technology goes"? Or are you more opportunistic?
No, not opportunistic at all. I think it's a lot of repetitive stuff where people have really taken it for granted, or where the user experience could be completely different, or where there's a lot of analytics involved, where you used to have to, hire people that could understand complex models and complex systems, where now you can apply computers, or where you can apply machine learning. Those are the areas that I really am focused on. Like, hey, can you get the data? If yes, why are people doing it? Right? They're just gonna start making mistakes, and then kind of fine tuning some of that stuff. But anytime where it's a repetitive process, or where really I think the information should be in somebody else's hands, or where the consumer actually would prefer to have that type of information. And you've brought up real estate. Real estate is actually, in my opinion, undergoing innovation with companies that have made a dent as it relates to just analytics and the value of your home. And like even in Alberta, at least, like just the other day I logged in. I also have my real estate license, which I've just had since I've been 18. I just maintain, so don't call me for real estate services, please. But I logged in the other day, and I'm like, the whole platform and user experience has changed on that side too. So there is constant changes that are happening, and some of them are useful and some of them not as much. So that one, I think, realtors are expected to have that kind of knowledge. So there, I'd probably say, I don't know. Everyone learns how to use it. Everyone struggles through it. Maybe not the best use case, but they're trying to stay on top of whatever's happening.
For those of us in the US, we believe Canada handled the crisis a little bit better than we did. But setting aside healthcare part of the crisis, I mean, what are you seeing companies as they go through the crisis tapping into technologies? One of the things we noticed is obviously a lot of the retailers went e-tailing, and there was online commerce, there was delivery services emerged, and a lot of new businesses around that capability. Are you seeing similar transformation in the underlying businesses in Canada due to the crisis?
Yeah, so I'm also involved in a little food company. Big transition to getting people to focus on online delivery, and companies that were very much set on, no, we don't want to do takeout, you can only dine in a restaurant. Technology is now coming to a place where you're being forced to adopt it. And and you don't really have a choice, and you're going to go out of business. And we're seeing a lot of companies in Canada go out of business too, but those are the companies that, COVID wasn't the reason. COVID is what pushed them over the edge, in my opinion. And companies that said, no, we're not going to adopt, like to me, that was the last push, is to, hey, if you're going to be that resistant for that long, you might want to blame COVID, but really you should have probably made a different decision a few years ago. And like when I think about like RPA and things like that, that's where I think there's a big opportunities for companies to probably resist at the beginning, but it's something that they have to adopt later on, in my opinion. Because if you're not automating and you're still getting people to do jobs where they could be doing different types of jobs, you're going to just have high operating costs long term, and those people could be deployed somewhere else. And you're seeing that, with office space and storage and all those types of things.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned minute books and the legal services industry, and I was talking to somebody else who was in the consulting, and these used to be the areas that people said would never be automated. I remember my marketing was thought to be an art, therefore it could never be automated. And nowadays we're on the cusp of basically completely automated digital marketing out there. So yeah, I share the optimism. I think there's going to be a lot more automation than some of these industries anticipated, and I'm seeing this around legal services quite a bit. So when one thing I'm still fascinated about is putting your entrepreneur hat on is you seem to be equally passionate about wellness as you are about licensing and maybe some other areas. I mean, how do you sort it in your head? Like when you look at the purely from a value perspective, not necessarily the passion perspective, the value perspective of these businesses, is a dollar? Is that how you look at this, or are you trying to make certain changes in the world around you that attracts you to these kinds of businesses?
Definitely making changes in the world around me and trying to figure out what's important for me. And also, what kind of team do I want to be around, and what kind of industry do I want to be around? So, my most recent, I'm going to call it passion, is around music royalties, but that was because I wanted to be in an asset class that was not correlated to stocks, that was going to be a better return than bonds, and that also wasn't correlated to the real estate market. And music royalties hit all those buckets where you're also getting cash flow all the time, because you have, streaming from YouTube, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and the list goes on. And the area we specifically focus on is acquisitions between 100,000 up to 5 million, where when you're analyzing a lot of different variables and a lot of different sources of where your revenue comes from, it gets really, really cumbersome to do an analysis of a smaller acquisition. And so larger companies that are public or have raised 500 million plus, they pass on a lot of those opportunities. But when it's above 5 million, they'll pay 10 times to 20 times last year's revenue, versus we're paying 4 to 5 times revenue, or maybe up to 8 times revenue. And once we start consolidating a base of those assets, which we can do by analyzing that using machine learning, where we look at 18 different variables over there, which most people can't even do. We had to get a team that's, we had to recruit people from Amazon and Facebook and Snapchat. So we kind of went to the best companies around the world, at least perceived that way. Sorry, I should say it. And brought people that had some domain expertise and help us with some machine learning algorithms, so we can do our analysis and start picking up things in a neglected space. And I really do call it neglected space, because when I go back to passion, it's now we have an income stream for our investors and ourselves that we can rely on, because ownership in IP is life of the artist plus 70 years. And for me personally, that anxiety of cash flow, which everyone during COVID's like, well, am I going to have a job? Am I going to have a paycheck? Government's bailing people out. Like, people really should have investments that pay them monthly cash flow, so that they don't have to worry about these bailouts. And that's why this was an important asset class for me. And I spent over 2 years probably thinking about what kind of private equity or fund structure I want to get in, because in the past, I was also in the oil and gas space, where we raised capital, probably close to $600 million. and deployed that. And I was like, if I'm going to do this again, I want to make sure I'm in an industry that's where we can do this repeatable and grow. And that's what music royalties was about.
And it's fascinating to me about music royalties because I remember you mentioned Wharton. There was a whole conversation in their digital marketing class about how the ad marketplace, which used to be pencil, papers, lawyers signing up advertisements and affiliate royalties, and now it completely moved online, and advertisements and the royalties and the payments get handled in like nanoseconds on the e-commerce side. And I assume that's not the way royalties work in the music world yet. Is that you think that could happen, that all these rights basically gonna be traded online completely?
Yeah, there's already some platforms coming out, and one of the angel investments that I actually made was into a company that's doing the auditing of essentially if music royalties are being paid out. Because right now there's like 150 organizations collaborating and working together to try and organize music royalties from, when you listen to it in the bar or a restaurant or a pub or you stream it somewhere. Like it's super fragmented. So we're assuming that by us building a pretty decent position of catalogs and stuff now, in the future, those microtransactions you're referring to, they'll be captured. And I think right now there's estimates that that's anywhere between 15 to 25% of uncaptured plays. So once we capture and recapture that stuff, there's again incremental value built in by just having an existing asset base as technology keeps improving and they're able to recognize more of those missed transactions. So yeah, absolutely. That's something that is in our value prop that we don't count on, but it's some of that upside that I think will definitely be there.
Both you and I had various interests in the blockchain space, and one of the things I remember back in probably 5, 6, 7 years ago was this whole argument that blockchains will actually help artists, and artists in both in terms of musical artists, but also painters and the like, to basically control the provenance and the rights around their creations. It's one area that I definitely feel it has been unfulfilled. Or am I missing something?
You know what? I don't know, because the more I'm getting into that specific space, I think it's more important at the moment for artists to get their distribution out easily onto, these many different platforms so people can listen to it and they can generate revenue. And as we're uploading content and moving and buying assets around, we're right now more worried about get the distribution out than we are about protecting the IP. I think you first want, you don't want to have massive barriers to entry or to capitalize, but once those are in place, then of course you want to protect it. And that's why I think you have to make sure it's frictionless. So once blockchain can get to a point where it becomes more frictionless, or you can integrate it after the fact, I think that's where it's going to be big. Like when I think about smart contracts, they have to be kind of set up from scratch. And I don't know anyone yet that's been able to really go into existing contracts or amending contracts and then starting to monetize or monitor those. I don't know anyone that's really doing that yet. I think that will be very interesting once blockchain gets to, looking at the traditional, and then it's just like an open API integration. I think that'll be very interesting.
So Alex, you've been we talked about it in oil and gas, real estate. You had a resort in the Maldives. You're into music rights and wellness. What's next? What is it that you get excited about? Is there technology out there, or maybe a sector that you're trying to conquer?
Good question. And we just launched our fund for the music royalties. So that's what I'm excited about right now. But if you asked me a year ago, our health and wellness company was growing, and I was on the Ben Greenfield podcast over there talking about that. So we've been getting really good traction over there from major companies wanting to onboard and get our corporate wellness program. So right now I'm gonna say I'm focused on the music royalty side, which is why I probably brought it up a few times here during our conversation. But in the past, real estate was exciting for me, but I was super worried about offices even 5 years ago. So you mentioned me being in Calgary. One thing that I noticed is because I was in Calgary, I wasn't always getting the best talent. So about 5 years ago, we got rid of our entire office. Everyone that was in Calgary, we made them work remotely so that we would learn to work remotely. And then we started hiring people from Brazil and from Europe and from Southeast Asia and really all across the world to be able to tap into that talent pool, and obviously the United States as well. So I think what I'm excited about is teams being able to collaborate more, and that's where you're seeing platforms like Zoom and just exploding, and Teams and Slack. So I think Slack's been great. I've been using it for a few years now. So I think anything that's going to make the collaboration space more streamless is going to be interesting. Anything that you can automate on that side of things, people even trying to do their scheduling, right? Collaboration is, I think, the next big interesting space that people will be focusing on, that people will need. So that's my thoughts.
So Alex, thanks a lot for joining me today. It's always great to see you, and I'm fascinated by your varied interests. I'm sure if we have another check-in in a year from now, it's going to be another completely set of new businesses. But wish you great success with the current ones you have, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.